This is Inside Via Media Publishing. I'm T.G. LaFredo. I'm an editor with Via Media, and I'm excited to bring you this, first in a series of conversations to let you know about the projects we have coming up and to introduce you to the authors we're working with. I hope you'll enjoy the company. Today I'm speaking with Jan Kauskas, author of Laoshi, Tai Chi, Teachers, and Pursuit of Principle. Hey Jan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, yeah.
All right.
More to the point, can you understand me? That's the other question.
I don't know, but we'll find out.
Yeah, we will do, yeah.
In May, we put out Laoshi, your first book, if I'm not mistaken. Is that your first?
That's correct, yeah.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
We think it's a heck of a book.
Well, I'm glad you do. I'm glad you do. I think it's pretty good myself, but I'm glad other people find something of value in it.
Yeah, so we'll get into the book as we go along, but I think maybe the first thing we should do is introduce you a little bit. Where are you, by the way, right now? Are you in Glasgow?
Yeah, I'm in Glasgow. I live in the west end of Glasgow, and it's sunny here, despite what people might think. Often people think Glasgow's always raining, but we've had some really good weather of late. So it's a sunny, pleasant, sunny evening here in Glasgow.
Oh, very nice. And what is your temperature like?
Well, it went up to about 20 degrees today, so it's nothing to rival yours, but for us that's pretty good, So this week we're going to maybe reach 25, and that'll be pretty hot for me as far as I can see.
20 or 25, that sounds pretty nice to me. I live in the Mojave Desert where it's often 40 or 45, so...
Yeah, well, I don't think that's ever been known in Glasgow. I don't think so at all.
Right. So, Jan, what's your background in martial arts?
Right. Well, it's a fairly long story because I've had a lot of teachers, but I wouldn't want to mention all of them.
Okay.
But I started when I was about 11 years old because I was getting a bit of trouble at school with some of the other boys, and so a friend of my mother suggested I go to learn karate. So I went to the Kobe Osaka Karate Club in Glasgow Street in Glasgow, and started off there. I just used to go there on a Saturday morning, and it wasn't that serious, to be fair, because we were just young lads, and we spent actually more time fighting in the changing rooms than we did on the mat. And so it was kind of a kind of informal. It was a good club. Don't get me wrong. It was a good club run by a fellow called Tommy Morris. But we were just young boys. We were messing about most of the time. And so I did a couple of years there, doing once a week. And then I went to join the Army Cadet Force when I was 13 years old because I thought I wanted to be a soldier. So I was getting in quick, join the Army Cadet Force. And one of the instructors there taught Aikido. His name was Dean Simpson, and Dean was quite a big influence of my life when I was a young lad, because he introduced me to Aikido, which I really loved. And so for the next 4 years, I practiced Aikido 2 or 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. Now, again, it was young lads, and we were all a bit rough and ready, so it was technically pretty good because Dean was a good teacher, but his point of view was we were young boys from Glasgow, and so it could be a little bit fruity at times in the sense that, if you're doing a breakfall, that some of the other lads would pull on your sleeve to make the breakfall difficult for you. So it was a good grounding. It was quite tough, but it was enjoyable, and people didn't get injured, so it wasn't that crazy, but it was a lot of fun. Round about the age of 18, I started to study with Dean's teacher, a fellow called Billy Coyle, and if you've read the book, you'll see Billy Coyle's name mentioned. He died a couple of years ago, but he was a fantastic Aikido teacher. Probably one of the best Aikido teachers in the country. And I studied with him for about 4 years, a couple of times a week with him, but then I'd go to study with anybody I could, study Aikido with anybody around Glasgow and go to various courses with Japanese instructors when they'd come over. But Billy Coyle was my main teacher, and he was a wonderful man and a fantastic teacher.
So where did you go after that then?
Well, actually I began to get too intense in my practice, I think, up to the mid-20s, early to mid-20s, and so I actually took a step back from martial arts for a couple of years and only dabbled, did a little bit of Shotokan here and there, and tried a few other Aikido teachers, but I kind of didn't practice so intensely because I was feeling I was becoming a bit of a gunslinger. I thought there were a lot of wrongs in the world, and I somehow thought it was up to me to right those wrongs. And so I was a bit confrontational in my attitude, and so I thought to myself, this isn't the way I am, this isn't me.
Yeah.
And so I took a step back from intense martial arts or hardstyle training and kind of took a break for a while, for a few years, and then came across Tai Chi. And I'd always been interested in Taoist philosophy, and when I found a Tai Chi teacher, I started as soon as I could, and I studied with the local teachers around Glasgow, because there's a few by that time, for about 7 years, going to various classes. And somewhat towards the end of that time, I became a teacher myself. So I was teaching Tai Chi, my early 30s, I was teaching Tai Chi on a kind of part-time basis, because I was still working, but then decided I was going to do some Tai Chi. Then around about 95, I went to study with Wolf Lowenthal, because I'd read There Are No Secrets.
Right.
And I thought this is fantastic because, as you probably know, with different teachers, they have different emphasis on things.
Sure.
And Wolf seemed to have just the right emphasis for me in terms of martial arts, philosophy, and Chi development. So I contacted Wolf and went across to New York to meet him. And for the next 7 years, I was studying with Wolf. Now, that was, I was living here still in Glasgow, but I'd go across to New York to start with a couple of times a year. And after a short while, he invited me to come and stay with him in Amherst whenever I was over. So for two or three times a year, I would go and stay with Wolf for 2 or 3 weeks at a time and do practice in the morning and then go around with him doing his teaching in the evening. It was a fantastic time. He was a marvelous man, a thoughtful, insightful human being, and, a fellow called David Chen, who you may have heard of. He died a couple of years ago. He's a well-known Tai Chi player in America. He described Wolf as a Tai Chi sage, and, I would say go along with that quite happily.
It sounds like you were really doing an apprenticeship at that time.
That's correct, and Wolf encouraged me in a lot of ways. During that time, he encouraged me to give up work and do Tai Chi full-time. So at some point after a few years studying with Wolf, I became a professional Tai Chi teacher, and basically I've done that ever since.
Pretty scary step to take, though, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely, because you're stepping out onto a limb. You're giving up secure employment, right. And then you don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I was kind of lucky for a while. The Tai Chi scene in Glasgow suddenly exploded for a few years. And, things have peaks and troughs, and I think we're in a bit of a trough just now. The economy is not what it was. Right. But for a number of years, I just timed it right, so I got a bit of a start. And so Wolf was instrumental in encouraging me to do that. If it hadn't been for Wolf, I don't think I would have given up secure employment to teach Tai Chi.
Jan, a lot of these points that you're mentioning sound familiar to me, and they're things that you touch on in Laoshi. I noticed on Amazon.com, Laoshi is regarded as a semi-fictional memoir. I guess it's a good chance for us to talk about that. What does that mean, semi-fictional memoir?
Yeah, well, some people might not appreciate it because somebody once said to me, what you mean is you've got genre confusion. But no, that's not what I mean. When I decided I wanted to write something, I felt I wanted to write something that was true and sincere and genuine. And I didn't want to write something that was kind of rose-tinted or syrupy. And my experience of life, both in martial arts and in life in general, is that it's bittersweet. And so I wanted to write something in a way to express the grittiness of life and not sanitize things and the grittiness of martial arts. And as well as to say, well, there's good stuff and there's bad stuff. The trouble with that is that sometimes it can come across as being a little preachy, or it might sound a little bit vindictive or ungrateful. And so the question is, how do you write something that's real and true, but put it across in such a way that it doesn't turn people off immediately and say, well, you're so negative about this, that, or the other. My view is that things like martial arts have their good and their bad, and I don't want to be somebody who sanitized what I wanted to say. I wanted to say something that was real and true, and the way I thought to do that was to develop kind of characters in abstract and tell the truth in a fictional setting. And, sometimes I reckon we can say more truth by telling stories. So that's the approach I took. So that's what semi-fictional means to me. It's truth, but put in a fictional setting.
You talked about creating characters, and we see a few different characters in the book, but the two principal characters are Laoshi and the student. Can you talk a little bit about them and their relationship?
Yep, for sure. The relationship between Laoshi and the student is the core of the book, and it explores this idea of what's described in the foreword of the book as Ishin Denshin, which is a Japanese phrase, and it basically means heart-to-heart transmission. And I believe in that as a reality because the teachers I have had, like Wolf and Billy Coyle and Dean, and not to mention Ken Van Sickle and Mr. Laoshi Hung, who I also studied a little bit with. These people I felt I had a relationship with, and that relationship changed me. So as a human being, I changed by being in contact with them. It wasn't just technique. Now, I've also had teachers who I couldn't trust. There was a fellow who, every time I practiced with him, I get injured because he liked to hurt people. So, I don't think that's a particularly useful teacher. And there's another fellow who, he wasn't dangerous, but everything he said to you, you had to think about because he was always sending you off on what we call a bum steer. For instance, I was doing a map reading competition once, or a map reading exercise, and he said, you ready to go? You know what you're doing? Go down that road, right? I said, yeah. Off you go then. And it was only 10 minutes later, after I was walking down this road, looking at this map, thinking, this doesn't make any sense, that I realized he deliberately sent us down the wrong road. And that was his way of saying, listen, don't take everything that I say to be true.
Wow.
Now, that's kind of interesting, but I always feel if you can't trust your teacher, how can you trust life? And so the relationship with the Laoshi and the student is about the growing, deepening relationship of that communication between them, which works at a non-verbal level as well as the technical level that teacher and the student enjoy together. As well as that, I'm interested in the idea that a teacher should have a bit of edge. Alan Watts talks about what he calls the irreducible rascality of people. And I think a teacher should have a bit of that. And so I kind of hope and think that Laoshi does. And the student also has to cope with that, understand how Laoshi operates, because Laoshi is a human being as well. He's not some kind of mystical super being. And the relationship between them develops because of the flaws of both of them, as well as the good points that they both bring to the relationship.
And I think part of why that works so well is you treat them both with dignity. I mean, I think it would be easy enough, and you said you didn't want this to be pedantic, you didn't want it to seem preachy, and you can do that when you do the student-teacher dialogue. The student never really feels like a foil, like somebody that you set up and have him make mistakes so that Laoshi can come and knock him down and fix it and say, this is how it's really done. Instead it seems like the student's a real person and somebody who's on a real search.
Yeah, that's true. Because, it's been a feature of my life that I felt that I was trying to understand through martial arts how to be in this world. It's more about how to be rather than what I have. And, to paraphrase Raymond Chandler, the idea is how do you walk down the mean streets without becoming mean yourself? Mm-hmm. And, when I was younger, literally and figuratively, I had to walk the mean streets. And I found that very difficult because the problem I faced was my role models were initially parents, school teachers, and the clergy. And that's all very well, but they didn't answer the questions I needed answered. And so I found that in martial arts. But if you take it outside the martial arts discussion for a moment, just in life in general, how do you be with life? And that's the question the student is trying to understand. Because, when you look at it, from my point of view anyway, life is always flowing, and we're always trying to stop it flow. And the question is, how do you get to a mindset where you can allow yourself to flow with life without putting the brakes on and artificially trying to force life to do what you want? I don't want to trivialize the difficulty the student has. The student has to be real in order for the difficulties that the student faces to be real as well.
You have a lifetime of martial arts experience. It's clear that you really poured that into this book.
Yeah.
And if I had to guess, I would say there are probably times where you identify very closely with what the teacher is saying, and times where you really identify with what the student is saying, having experienced all points on that spectrum.
Yeah, that's correct, because I think in all of us there's a bit of the student and a bit of the teacher, a bit of Laoshi and a bit of the student in all of us, because we're both the seed and the flower, if you like. The thing about the path that certainly I'm on, and I believe a lot of other people on, is that to remain balanced or centered in the world is very difficult. It's a fragile thing. So what happens sometimes, even when you feel that you've made a lot of progress in life, the next day you could find yourself, it's all kind of cracked, and you've managed to, as Wolf used to say, one day you could be a 4-star general, and the next day you're busted right down to private. And that seems to be the way with these things, that sometimes you think, yeah, I've been really centered, I've dealt with a lot of stuff really well today, and then tomorrow it's a whole different story. Right. Because the sense of balance isn't as strong there, the sense of being centered isn't as strong. It's a continuous practice. And yeah, for sure, some days I feel like the most humble beginner student, and other days I feel a bit better, more like approaching what the Laoshi character is. Right. So it's a bit of both, but definitely for sure.
Can you give us a look into this book? Do you have a little excerpt that you would read for us?
Yeah, sure. Well, unaccustomed as I am to reading on radio, I shall do my best. I've got a little segment from Chapter 6, Tales of the Repulsive Monkey. So I'll not read all of it, but there's a little segment in it which I think is very good and gives you a flavor of Laoshi.
Perfect.
So, being in class, I felt alive, relaxed physically but mentally alert. Although there was a structure which almost never varied, within that structure there was a mixture of practice, philosophy, stories, instruction and jokes, mostly though not exclusively about Tai Chi. As we relaxed, we learned not by fixating on increasingly minor points of technique, but rather by some form of osmosis, a mysterious and wonderful gift of the heart-mind. It seemed ridiculous to Laoshi that Tai Chi, the art of relaxation, should be learned in a tense, angst-filled atmosphere. It was better to model the feeling we were aspiring to than be told what it should be. His refrain was, "Don't be intimidated by what you don't know. Be encouraged by what you do know." It took the grind out of learning and put enjoyment in its place, making a lifelong approach to learning seem eminently possible. He also liked to say, "When you are cheerful, you are chieful." As part of this way of teaching, he would talk to us about the psychological and philosophical implications of the posture as we rested between bouts of technical instruction. I would often become so engrossed in what he was saying that I forgot what those technical points were. Nevertheless, I returned to practice again and would somehow find improvement. Learn and forget. Learn and forget. That is the secret, he used to say. Although you never really forgot, you just remembered in a different way. This seemed to move learning more into the province of the heart-mind. In particular, I used to like to hear him talk about the step back to repulse monkey sequence, or the repulsive monkeys, as he liked to call it. He would often start by saying that the form could be considered a journey beginning with the early postures and moving towards immortality in the Taoist sense by achieving something which other people might call enlightenment or liberation. He would typically say, "Repulse monkey is near the middle of the form, and represents the chattering mind, like the chattering of monkeys. We must step back to repulse this chattering in order for us to reside in the company of the heart-mind. It is not to say that the chattering has no value. It does, but it is like a secretary who reminds us of appointments, deals with travel arrangements, or replies to correspondence. It is there to support you, not control you. If you didn't have this capacity, then you wouldn't have gotten here. You have to remember the time, know the bus route, remember your shoes and class fees. But when you are here, you should not be thinking about the bus ride home, or what is on TV, or about buying milk for your cocoa tonight. Once it has completed its job of logistics, it should be silent. But here's the problem. It cannot be silenced. All we can do is turn our attention away from it and let it play like a recording at the back of our minds, which we tune into from time to time to make use of whenever we wish. The repulsed monkey talk often included Kingman's thoughts on its martial application. As the waist is turned, the front hand is extended forward at eye height to simulate a strike to the eyes of the attacker. Kingman did not advocate this response lightly, but considered it necessary under certain circumstances, such as when life is threatened or the attacker is armed. The defenses against knife attacks I learned in Aikido made Laoshi uncomfortable. He did not consider them realistic. If you try that, you'll be killed, he once told me while I was showing one of the other guys the kotegishi technique I had learned. Better to run away, or if you cannot, then improvise a weapon, or if you cannot do that, then attack the eyes. You may be lucky, he may be incompetent. There was one other time that an eye attack might be justified. Laoshi told us Kingman talked of the old days in China, where strange men could do amazing things, such as walk around the rim of a wicker basket without tipping it. Others practiced orange sand hand, a method whereby if they managed to touch your body with their hands, your insides would rot. The distinguishing feature of such fighters was that their palms were bright orange. According to Laoshi, Kingman advised striking the eyes of such a person before they could lay hands on you. I love these tall tales. Their value lay less in their veracity and more in the manner in which they contribute to the overall portraiture of the postures. I came to realize that each posture is located at the center of a web of concepts, including martial application, imagery, philosophy and psychology, health matters, and metaphor. To truly get the feel of the posture, an exploration of this web was as invaluable as it was enjoyable. Like a maestro, Laoshi would draw together diverse strands to create a masterpiece in the imagination. The result was a memorable symphony of ideas.
Very nice. Lovely stuff, Jan. Can you talk a little bit about your writing process?
Well, I can make a go at it. I suppose that means a couple of things to me. One is, when I actually write, which the procedure I have is that normally when I get up in the morning, I do my Tai Chi practice. Then I usually go for a walk, find a coffee shop, sit and read a book, or just contemplate the universe. And either sometimes an idea comes in, or I read a piece that makes sense to me, and I store it away for future reference. Then I go home and I write in the afternoon. So I physically actually do a couple of hours in the afternoon, and then I have to go to class in the evening to teach. And so when I first started doing this stuff, I was exhausted doing that because writing just depleted me. And I found myself going to class exhausted and unable to bring the energy to the class that I needed to, because quite often people come to class in a pretty kind of empty or depressed state or tired state, and I feel it's part of my job to spark them into a bit of a kind of more positive attitude. Later, though, I began to feel I was energized by the process of writing. When I started, the idea I thought was I would do some articles to say a few things here or there about Tai Chi and put them on the website. Then decided it was time to get serious and actually write something that could be made into a book. And then I was surprised because Laoshi kind of wrote itself. I just sat down with a computer and then started typing in, and pretty much what's in the book is the way it came out. There's maybe one chapter got moved, but it was pretty much as it is, just came out. And so I feel as though I practice my writing in the way I would practice martial arts. Is just get on with it, put it out there, and then maybe have a look at it to see how well it's going. The only difference was, or the only correction to that, was the first chapter was not very good, so I rewrote it. But apart from that, basically the book wrote itself. When the student is developing his relationship with Laoshi, in a lot of ways, the book itself helped me develop my relationship with writing.
Probably also helped develop your relationship with Tai Chi and to see it, what you were doing in a different way.
That's correct, because, the idea is the pen and the sword. So with all these things, they cross-fertilize each other. So Wolf has this idea that, crossing logs, he used to say, where different disciplines come together and support each other. So yeah, for sure, writing and Tai Chi go hand in hand with me now. So, I think people have encouraged me with writing, with saying a few good, kind words about my book, and so therefore they've encouraged me to keep on writing. So it's their fault.
If we have to lay blame, we know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't blame me. Yeah.
So at what point in that process did you know you were onto something special?
Well, it's an interesting question because I don't regard it that way. It was the book I felt I needed to write, but as for whether it's special or not, I don't really think that way. I think I'm maybe too close to it. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, the feedback that I've had has been both surprising and encouraging, especially the remarks of Douglas Weil. That was a real bonus. But I had my doubts about whether or not I wanted to release Laoshi. And it was Eileen, my partner, she gave me a really good bit of advice. She said to me, how would you feel if somebody else wrote this book? And I realized then that whether it's special or not, that's the book I needed to write, because I would have felt usurped if somebody else had come out and written Laoshi, and I'd read it and I thought, that's the book I should have written. And so whether it's special or not, I don't know, but I feel it's well written. And Eileen gives me confidence in that, because it's one thing to say, yeah, and you don't have anything to write about, and furthermore, you can't write either. So that would be a double blow. It's a bit like, I don't know if you've one of my favorite quotations is either about Calvin Coolidge or Calvin Coolidge may have said it, but the quotation is, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It says, he doesn't say much, but when he talks, he doesn't say much. And I don't want to be in that position where somebody says, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and furthermore, he doesn't know how to say it. So I don't know whether it's the book special or not, but it's certainly special for me because it's the book that I felt I needed to write.
So Jan, I'll probably make you uncomfortable now, but you alluded to what Douglas Weil had to say about the book on the back cover. His comment is, located at the intersection of Tai Chi and life, technique and principle, the veteran, beginner, and even non-practitioner will find wisdom that never descends into cliché. Mr. Kauskas delivers a highly edifying and entertaining cornucopia of anecdote, aphorism, and apocrypha, destined to become a modern classic. That's pretty high praise. Yeah,
it is, especially from someone like Douglas Weil, whose work I've respected over the years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I heard that he'd written that, I was... I think the expression is blown away. I really was. I was absolutely astounded by it, and very grateful to him for his comments. I'm very grateful to him not only to have the opinion, but be prepared to put that opinion down on paper. And mind you, as well as that, it's beautifully written as well. So in some ways I thought, I wish I'd written that because it's fantastic.
Well, see, I was going to ask you how the reception's been so far, but it sounds like the reception's been pretty good.
Yeah, well, anyone that's read it has liked it. And one of the really good pieces of feedback I got was from a guy I respect quite a lot. He's a martial artist and former soldier. Proper soldier, a tough guy.
Right.
And he's interested in martial arts. He's interested in all that kind of thing, interested in meditation and philosophy and spirituality, as well as the military arts. And he said, thank you for writing this. And that felt, that felt real and genuine, and I was touched by that.
Yeah.
What's also interesting is that people who are not martial artists who have read it have really liked it. And I think maybe that's a feature that sometimes people don't realize. It's not just a book for people who study martial arts. It's got a kind of crossover appeal because you could say it reads like a novel.
Yeah.
And so anybody who doesn't do martial arts, who I know who's read it, have also said they've really enjoyed it because the stories are germane to people's lives, not just martial arts, but outside martial arts.
Yeah, I think anyone who's really pursuing something with that gung fu in the traditional sense of energy, time, right?
Yep.
I think that you can see the truth in these stories even if you have no idea what Step Back to Repulse Monkey is all about.
Yeah, that's exactly right, because there are a lot of anecdotes which, although they are woven into a martial arts story, they're about life, and it's about how life and people use the philosophy of martial arts to help them in their lives.
I want to touch on an aspect of that philosophy. I have a little quote here that I picked out from the book. This is at the beginning of chapter 31, and it goes like this. It's just a short little excerpt. I want to read to you and get a comment from you. One evening after class, Robert, one of the senior students, told me of a telephone inquiry Laoshi had received. The call came from a woman who informed Laoshi that she had learned the 24-step form, Zhang Manqing's 37 posture form, and some weapons forms. She was now looking for someone to teach her the original Yang Long form. She was taken aback, Robert said, when Laoshi said, "You already know enough forms. Why do you want to learn another?" "Laoshi is not a supermarket," Robert added. "You don't go in and buy a form off the shelf." Okay, so this is something that's obviously important to you. This is a topic or a theme that you touch on a few different times in the book. And so I wanted to know what your thought is about this sort of supermarket mentality among martial artists.
Yeah, well, it's not just among martial artists. It's also for people in general, because from my point of view, something like Tai Chi or martial arts or Zazen or some kind of philosophy of life that you follow, the Tao, is kind of an antidote to the downside of living in an instantaneous, consumerist, throwaway society. Because we've been pressurized into thinking certain ways which I think are not particularly good for us. For instance, we're all pressurized into doing more, and more is better, without realizing that there are problems of affluence. There may be different problems, but the problems are all the same. And there's a growing problem in this country, and I think the same in the United States, with obesity and anxiety.
Oh, absolutely.
And the idea that more and more choice is a good thing, I don't believe is true, because it leads to paralysis. Consciousness is a double-edged sword because it's a feedback mechanism. And if we have more and more choice, we are constantly second-guessing ourselves because we're not sure we've made the right choice. And so it leads to a lot of anxiety and depression. Now, here's something that I heard a few weeks ago which really staggered me, because Scotland is a small country. Although it's part of the UK, it's a country in its own right, and it has 5 million people.
Right.
Last year, there were 5 million prescriptions for antidepressants in Scotland.
You're kidding me.
I mean, that doesn't mean to say everybody in Scotland is depressed. And it's not just because of the weather either. What it means is that some people have repeat prescriptions.
They're really racking up the points, yeah.
Yeah, that's terrible. And it's not because there's anything wrong with living here.
Yeah.
It's a fine country to live in. It's just that the pressure that people are under, and it's brought about by the way we live in this consumerist society where we're always buying a solution to a problem. And there are people, I believe, who cynically create a fear so that they can sell you a solution.
Absolutely.
And those fears are actually destroying a lot of people's lives. So Tai Chi is meant to be an antidote to that. It's not meant to be another commodity that then becomes part of the problem. So, now you don't know what style of Tai Chi to do, and if you've got your Tai Chi, how many forms do you need? So I think that the passage is getting at that the thing about Tai Chi is in the quality of it and its understanding that some of the ideas that we've been led to believe are maybe not the best for us. Having said that, there's also this idea that the cure is in the poison and the poison is in the cure. Maybe the paradox of martial arts becoming part of the problem is the way things are meant to be. I don't know, but it'd be very Taoist if it was. But I see myself and people like myself who teach these things like martial arts and Tai Chi, to say to people, you don't have to believe this stuff that they're telling you.
Yeah.
You don't have to live that way. You can live in a way which is wholesome and healthy without having to get on the treadmill of having to get more and more and have more and more choice.
That insecurity and that anxiety manifest in a certain way among many martial artists. And that is a lot of, I think younger ones in particular, maybe guys with too much time on their hands, they say, well, I need to learn judo so that I can grapple, but I need to learn taekwondo so I can get some good kicks. And I need to join an MMA club because I need to be able to fight on the ground. But I should probably take up some Tai Chi too, because then I can meditate and that will make my kicks better.
Yep, that's right, yeah. I mean, it's a point of view, and it's not one that I subscribe to. It's not so much what art you do, but with the sincerity you bring to that art. Mm-hmm. And, when people think about martial arts, they sometimes don't realize that something like fighting is a peculiar thing that is not predictable. Yeah. And so people want to study lots of different things so they can be prepared for all eventualities.
Right.
Guess what? You can't be prepared for all eventualities because life is infinite. And life has infinite variety. And so whatever you think's going to happen is not going to happen. Whenever I've tried to predict the problems life's going to have, it doesn't work that way. So we build ourselves the defenses which ultimately don't work because life comes round the back of them and kicks us in the backside.
Right.
And when you have your various techniques, then that's the same thing as well. You'll be presented with a situation that's new.
For me, this is sort of a call, and it says, engage in fewer pursuits, but the things you do them very well.
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah, for sure. And something, I'll tell you something bizarre, is that, you talk about other martial arts, and, for instance, Royce Gracie, who, I admire the man incredibly, mm-hmm. but recently he's come out to say that, the people who are studying MMA and whatever from the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background should be concentrating more and more on their own Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and not doing boxing and things. So that's quite a surprising thing, I think, from someone like Royce Gracie.
Yeah.
Because the impression is that, people should be doing different martial arts to take away the deficiencies in one with the strengths of the other.
Right.
But that's not the only way of looking at things. And if people like Royce Gracie are saying that as well, then that impresses me. But also, if you read the book, there's the little story by Gozo Shioda when a fellow comes to challenge the Yushiba crew in their own dojo, and the man that defeats the aggressor, if you like, only knows one technique.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite moments in the book. It's delightful.
Yeah. I mean, they're tough guys. They were tough men, and the people that came to challenge them weren't kidding. They weren't fooling around.
Right.
And Mr. Akazawa defeats the fellow with one technique.
The one thing he knows.
That's right, but he knows it really well.
Right.
He has a lot of faith in it because O-sensei has said to him, "This is the foundation."
Yeah. Jan, in the epilogue for the book, you write that, I don't know, you kind of seem to allude that there's more to say to this story. You say, I found myself teaching Tai Chi, a role I would have sooner avoided, but nevertheless the one I inhabited for the next 2 decades of my life. How this came to pass, and the insights and lessons I learned on the way are, as they say, another story. It sounds to me like there's more coming from you.
Yeah, well, as I said before, it's your own fault, because if you encourage me to write, then I'll write.
Okay.
So the thing is that, you wheedled it out of me. Yeah, I'm writing something else because I'm kind of halfway through another book, but the idea is that Laoshi is written from a student's point of view. And at some point, the student becomes a teacher. And I've been teaching Tai Chi full-time now for 15 years. And I feel like there's something to say about it from the point of view of a teacher. So the second book is like a sequel, looking at similar, but not the same ideas, but sort of similar issues, but from the point of view more of the teacher. Now, although in Laoshi you get the teacher's point of view, this other book is written from the point of view of the student as the experiencer of a whole new set of problems which come along when you start teaching. So I've got that on the go just now, but also I've got an idea that I'd like to write something like a thriller, because I actually enjoy martial arts fiction.
Oh, okay.
And I've kind of got the idea for writing something of a kind of thriller novel type book about the friction that people have in the martial arts world between those who are studying the way as a way of self-development or a spiritual thing, and those who are studying the jutsu, the effective combat techniques of the arts. And there's a bit of friction there between people on both sides of that argument. And I thought I'd like to maybe explore that in terms of a novel. So I've got that as an idea as well. So hopefully I'll manage to get that put on paper.
Mm-hmm. Turning our attention back to Laoshi, let's do our shameless promotion part of our chat.
Yes.
Where is this book available?
Well, I should do the shameless self-promotion thing. The thing about it is the Scottish people are not very good.
Do you want me to do it?
Self-promotion. We're actually a bit reticent, but it's available both in print as a paperback and also as an ebook. So you can find it on Amazon.com and Amazon.uk as well, both as the paperback and the ebook. But it's also on BarnesandNoble.com and also through iTunes and Kobo. And of course, if you can, you could buy it through viamediapublishing.com, which is the publishing website, which would be the best place to buy it, or the Journal of Asian Martial Arts, because I think there's a new website been launched recently.
Yeah, journalofasianmartialarts.com and also viamediapublishing.com. Does this feel, this shameless self-promotion, does it feel very against the Tao to you, Jan?
That's one of the topics in my next book, because you could imagine the magazine, the Taoist Advertiser. How much copy would be in that magazine? It'd be virtually nothing. Right. I remember once when if you don't mind this little anecdote, when I was studying with Wolf, and he was doing a beginner's class, and myself and another colleague from Scotland, we were over there and in his beginner's class. And after a while, he asked some of his students he said, well, we'll do some testimonials as to what Tai Chi's done for you. And both myself and the other student from Scotland would look at each other with horror. And it was kind of interesting because physically we retreated into the back while some of the other students made their way forward. So it's not the Scottish way. There's a saying in Scotland, I kent your father, which in English is, I knew your father, which is the way Scottish people are saying is, be humble, remember where you came from.
Okay.
So it's self-promotion for most Scottish people is a little bit uncomfortable. But, do a little bit now and then just to keep the financial wheels greased.
You have to do something for penance afterward, though.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Hey, so I want to know, you travel to give Tai Chi classes and workshops, right?
Well, I have done for a while, yeah, but recently not so much, but I have done, yeah, definitely.
Uh-huh. Have you ever come here to give classes?
I haven't yet done that, but who knows, because both myself and Eileen are very fond of the United States. Eileen used to live and work there for a number of years before she returned to Scotland. And we've always talked about doing the grand tour of the United States. Like the English aristocrats used to do. They used to do in the 18th, 19th century. They used to go across to Italy to do their grand tour of places with the Italian culture and whatever.
Right.
So we've thought about going to do our grand tour
That would be amazing, and you could work that into seminars and a book tour.
Well, that would be ideal if it could come about. So we'll need to work on that, yeah, for sure.
You also made a DVD a couple of years. When did you make a DVD, by the way?
That's maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. It was in response to questions from my students to have something that they could refer to after they got a class, because they would come to class and forget what we did, and it would be handy for them to have some kind of aid memoir. So I did a DVD and have been selling it just either through my classes or through the Autumn River Tai Chi website, because I have a very good friend who deals with that sort of thing for me. So people do buy it from the website directly. And so on it is basically the form I learned essentially from Wolf, and the sword form as well, both front and back.
And the DVD is simply titled Tai Chi Chuan, right?
Yep, that's right.
And your school is Autumn River Tai Chi, and the website is autumnrivertaichi.com. If I ordered that DVD, would it ship to the U.S.?
Yeah, it would do. It has done before. Jim, who deals with that, just told me that he has had some requests from the United States, and it seems to be no problem. It plays over there as well. So,
very good.
We have different regional variations in DVDs, but it seems totally fine. There's a small clip of it on YouTube, so people can have a look. If they go through the website, they can have a look at the video section, and there's a little clip of me doing the form, and then there's also a little bit of push hands and fencing. That's not on the DVD because I'm overcritical of myself. I mean, my students persuaded me to do a little bit of push hands and fencing and put it on YouTube, but I was always saying I didn't want to do it because I was going to wait till I could actually do it perfectly. And then one of them said, well, that might never happen. So I think I knew what he meant by that, but I'm not sure. So the trouble is, I feel very self-critical about these things, and so one of the comments on the YouTube clip regarding my form is a fellow that wants to point out a mistake in it, and I'm just grateful that he's only pointing out one mistake, so it's not too bad, I guess.
Jan, is there a way people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, people can email me through Autumn River Tai Chi, or if you look for me on Google under Laoshi or Jan Kauskas, then you can find the website. And I'm quite happy for people to write to me. I would certainly write back to anyone that wrote to me.
Very nice.
Through email. I'm not on the new media. I'm not on that. I'm not on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that.
Good for you.
And for reasons which I might go into in this forthcoming book.
Good for you, my friend. Neither am I.
Yeah. Well, there's technology is marvelous, but there's the old Chuan story about the fellow who's using a screw to get water out of the ground, or he's not using it is more the point. And somebody passes by and says to him, why don't you use the machinery to help you get water out the ground? Why are you still using the old bucket? And the fellow's response is it's wonderful Chuan Tzu's way of explaining things, but essentially it's the further you get away from the real deal, the more alienated you become. So I'm trying to keep myself real, as it were. Yeah. So, I use technology to the extent that I need to, but if I don't need to, I keep away from it.
Well, I think technology should serve us and not the other way around.
Absolutely right.
And I already have enough homework, so if I have that much more to keep up with.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've kept you for way too long, and you've been very gracious, and I appreciate it.
I've been enjoying it. Good.
Very good. So before I let you go, though, I want to ask you, we've kind of touched on it a little bit during our chat, but I want to ask you about Scottish as a second language. We all joked about this a little bit during the work on your book. And one thing that I was doing my last minute checks going through the manuscript, and I said, well, I see that, I'm aware of this as a Scottishism, this interjection or ach. And so I wanted to check because I saw in one spot in the manuscript it was spelled ACH, and another place it was spelled OCH. So one was ach, no, and the other one was ach, don't take it like that. Two different spellings. So I just wanted to make sure that, the author didn't make a mistake. So I wrote to you and asked you about it. Help me clear this up. You said, no, it's correct. There are two different spellings. There are two different feels here. And can you help me out with my Scottish?
Well, for a Glaswegian, it makes sense. Probably for people outside Glasgow, or maybe even certainly outside Scotland, it might not make any sense. But they are slightly different. Och is a bit more friendly. It's a bit more inclusive. Ach is a bit more dismissive. It's accusatory and a bit more, there's a sound of irritation in there. Now what's interesting about it is if you make the sound och, the mouth is rounded.
Okay.
But if you make the sound ach, it's a bit like you're showing your teeth.
Yeah, it sounds like you could spit after you do it too.
Yeah, that's right. Now a lot of Scots words, and this isn't Gaelic, this isn't Gaelic's a whole other language, but Old Scots, there's a lot of words that we use because there's a lot of onomatopoeia in the Scots tongue. For instance, there's a word called drich, and there's another one called druchit and glakit. And these are words which they sound a bit like what they are. Like drich refers to the weather, it's cold and it's damp and it's overcast. So when someone says, what a drich day, you can get the feeling of it. Druchit is when you're completely soaked, when you've been out in the rain or whatever, you've come out of the water, you're druchit. And one of my favourite words is glakit, which means stupid. So you say, look at that boy, he's glakit, pure glakit. You say, well, yeah, that's just sort of look at it. The sound is what it is, glakit. These are words that were old and they're still in modern usage. And so there's a lot of words like that people here understand, might not understand it over in America. But then again, within Scotland, there are some incredible regional variations. I mean, if you go to Aberdeen from Glasgow, you might not understand what they're talking about when they're talking their Doric tongue. You might not understand them at all.
If you get into this in any significant way in your fiction, for example, we may need to have an entire Scottish glossary at the back of the book. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you. When I was in New York, when I first used to go to New York, I used to stay in the youth hostel on Amsterdam Avenue. And there was this fellow who was working there, an older man who was working there as a kind of volunteer to give guidance to visitors to the city. And he said, oh, you're from Scotland? I said, yeah. He said, Train Spotting, that movie. I said, yeah. He said, what was it about? I thought that was just so funny because I heard, we couldn't believe this over here. There was an American version of it with subtitles.
Wow.
And that used to make us laugh because, to hear when you listen to that film, listen to the dialogue in that film, totally makes sense. And it's English. But, over there, where you're from, people just didn't understand it.
All the way from Glasgow, Scotland. That's Jan Kauskas, author of Laoshi, Tai Chi, Teachers, and Pursuit of Principle. Jan, thanks so much for your time.
Well, I've enjoyed myself. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I've enjoyed answering your questions, and made me think about things as well. It's been wonderful.
Wish you the very best of luck with Tai Chi and with Laoshi and upcoming books, and I really look forward to seeing them.
Great. Thank you very much.
And that is episode 1 of Inside Via Media Publishing. I'm T.G. LaFredo. Thank you so much for listening. Special shout out to my pals Eric Clemenzi and Steve Belleville. They are Kangaralian, and they wrote the music that we used here today. You can check them out at kangaralian.com. You can check us out at viamediapublishing.com and journalofasianmartialarts.com. Until next time, thanks again.
Well, I like Hong Kong Fu, but I don't know how much of martial arts are in that.